Why are you arguing about renovations? The mortgage isn't even paid off yet." The silence that followed my innocent question was deafening. My parents exchanged nervous glances while my sister Ivy suddenly became deeply fascinated with the carpet pattern. Something was very wrong. "Skylar, sweetheart," my mom began hesitantly. "Actually, the mortgage, it was paid off almost 2 years ago." 2 years. Nearly 24 bank transfers of $1,500 each that I had made since then. $36,000 donated to a house that was already paid off. But that was only the beginning. The real blow came when my father, unable to meet my gaze, muttered, "And recently, we transferred the house title to Ivy's name." My younger sister, who never contributed a single cent toward that house, who spent her life being supported while I worked twice as hard. 10 years of sending money religiously every month, 10 years of putting my own dreams on hold. Over $180,000. Invested not in my future, but in my sister's. And the justification that shattered something inside me forever? Your sister will never have your financial stability, Skylar. You'll always be okay. In that moment, I could have exploded. I could have screamed, cried, demanded my money back. But what I did next even surprised myself. My name is Skylar Winters. I'm 34 years old and a senior civil engineer at McKinley & Associates, one of Portland's most respected engineering firms. I specialize in sustainable infrastructure projects, and my work has been recognized in industry publications. Most people look at my career and assume my life is as well-structured as the buildings I design. The truth? I live in a one-bedroom rental apartment that barely fits my engineering books. Every month, as soon as I get my generous paycheck, the first thing I do is set aside $1,500 and transfer it to my parents' account. Only then do I start thinking about paying my own bills. This ritual began 10 years ago, right after I graduated. College. The recession had hit my family hard. My father, Richard, a bank manager for over 20 years, lost his job when his institution went under. My mother, Georgia, an elementary school teacher, didn't earn enough to cover all the expenses, especially the mortgage on the home I grew up in. I remember the phone call vividly. I had just finished celebrating my first week at my new job, when my mom called, her voice trembling. "Richard and I are thinking of selling the house," she said. "The bank is threatening foreclosure if we don't catch up on the missed payments." The house on Elm Street, where I learned to ride a bike on the long driveway, where I spent countless summer nights in the backyard, staring at the stars and dreaming of the buildings I'd design someday, where my dad built that treehouse that became my first design office when I was just 12. "How much do you need?" I asked without hesitation. "The monthly payment is $1,500, my mom replied. "But Skylar, we can't take your money. You just started your life." I insisted it was only temporary, that I could help until my dad found another job, that it was the least I could do after everything they had sacrificed to send me to college. What began as an emergency solution turned into a decade of financial support. My dad never made it back into the banking world. He took on a few temp jobs, but nothing close to his former salary. My mom retired 2 years ago, further reducing the household income. Meanwhile, I kept advancing in my career. I worked overtime, took on challenging projects others avoided, and built a solid reputation. Every promotion, every raise came with the same silent promise I made to myself. Soon I'll be able to save for my own house. But that soon never came. There was always a new need at my parents' house, a leaking roof, a burst pipe, a car that had to be replaced. And so, year after year, I delayed my own dreams. My best friend Tessa never understood. "Skylar, you design incredible buildings for other people to live in, yet you're still in that tiny apartment?" She was right. My apartment was functional, but nothing more. A secondhand couch, a dining table that doubled as a desk, walls I never bothered to paint because, after all, it was just temporary. Always temporary. At work, I became known for my almost obsessive attention to detail. "Winters never misses a thing," my colleagues would say. What they didn't realize was that this meticulousness was my form of control, the only area of my life where I truly had the power to determine outcomes. The embarrassing truth? At 34, with a career most people would envy. I've never taken a real vacation, never traveled abroad, never bought anything truly luxurious for myself. Every extra penny went into an emergency fund, not for me, but for my parents. If you've ever found yourself sacrificing your own dreams to help someone you love, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon. This story may sound unbelievable, but unfortunately it's more common than we think. And what happened next completely changed my perspective on family, loyalty, and self-worth. To fully understand the impact of that discovery, you need to know the dynamics of the Winters family. I grew up as the eldest daughter, the responsible one, the one who always did the right thing. From a young age, I took on responsibilities beyond my years. My sister, Ivy, 5 years younger than me, was raised under completely different rules. While I had to maintain perfect grades, Ivy was celebrated just for passing her classes. While I saved up my allowance to buy architecture books, Ivy got gifts just because she's special. The pattern was so consistent that even extended family members noticed. "You're so disciplined, Skylar," my uncle would say at family gatherings. "And Ivy is so spiritual." That was the family's code word for irresponsible, but still adored. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. Ivy has admirable qualities. She's charismatic, lights up any room she walks into, and is genuinely passionate about social and environmental causes. But while I built a stable career, Ivy bounced from one passion to another. A photography course she dropped, a writing career that lasted 3 months. She eventually found her path as a yoga instructor, a profession she truly loves, but one that provides little and irregular income, and that was never an issue for my parents. "Ivy is following her heart," my mom would say, while transferring money to cover my sister's late rent. When I once questioned this dynamic, my dad explained, "She's more sensitive, Skylar. Not everyone has your strength." Strength, independence, reliability. These were supposedly compliments, but over time, I realized they became excuses to give me less emotional support, less concern, fewer resources. In high school, when I earned a partial scholarship to study engineering, my parents were proud, but the celebration was modest. "Of course you got it. You've always been hardworking," they said, as if it was expected. I worked 2 part-time jobs all 4 years of college to cover the rest of my expenses, when Ivy was accepted to a less competitive arts college years. Later, my parents threw her a surprise party and paid for everything. "Ivy needs to focus on her creativity," they explained. She dropped out in her 2nd year. This pattern carried on into adulthood. While I was sending $1,500 each month for the mortgage, I learned my parents paid $3,000 for a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, for Ivy, to help her find her path. When I mentioned I was saving to take a specialization course in sustainable design, my mom suggested I look for scholarships. Tessa saw this dynamic long before I did. "Your parents treat you like an ATM with legs, while Ivy is the delicate princess who needs protection from the real world," she said after a particularly revealing Thanksgiving, where I spent the entire afternoon cooking while Ivy showed photos from her latest spiritual retreat. "They love me in their own way," I'd reply, though a voice inside me wondered if love was supposed to look like that. My coworker, Caleb, who had become a close friend over time, would often frown when I mentioned the monthly transfers. "Do they even say thank you?" he asked once. The question caught me off guard. I had never expected gratitude. It was simply my duty as a daughter, wasn't it? And then there were the little remarks, the constant insinuations. "It's great you have such a stable job. Skylar, some of us have to follow our hearts even when it's financially hard," Ivy would say during family dinners, as if my career choice was purely pragmatic and not a genuine passion. "Your sister is really making a difference in people's lives, with her yoga classes," my mom would add. "Isn't it wonderful she's found something so meaningful?" As if designing sustainable infrastructure to benefit entire communities was somehow less meaningful. As the years went on, the weight of this imbalance grew heavier, but I accepted it as part of our family fabric. After all, who questions the air they breathe? That dynamic had become my normal, and so I continued, month after month, transferring those $1,500. Calculator in hand, That added up to $18,000 a year. Over 10 years, more than $180,000, enough for a solid down payment on a house nearly anywhere in Portland, even in today's expensive market. But the house wasn't just a financial investment for me. It was a connection to my childhood, to precious memories I wanted to preserve. It was the place where I thought my parents would grow old with dignity. It was, or so I believed, an investment in our family, our shared bond. What I didn't realize was that, for the rest of my family, my contribution had long since stopped being an extraordinary sacrifice. It had become an expectation, a right, something as guaranteed as the sunrise. Until that fateful Sunday afternoon, when I decided to make a surprise visit to share some good news, my recent significant promotion. For the first time, I felt secure enough to begin gradually scaling back my financial support. I was ready to start building my own future. Little did I know that visit would reveal the truth that would change everything. It was one of those perfect fall Sundays in Portland. The kind of day when golden leaves shimmer under a crystal blue sky and the air has that crisp clarity that makes you feel like you can see more clearly, both literally and figuratively. I drove to my parents' house unannounced, something I rarely did. Normally, my visits were scheduled in advance, almost like business appointments. But that day, driven by the excitement of my promotion and the prospect of finally starting to build my own future, I decided to surprise them. I parked in the familiar driveway and immediately noticed that Ivy's car was there too, her worn-out Prius covered in peace and coexist stickers. A full family gathering then. Perfect. Carrying a small bottle of champagne I'd bought to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just something symbolic. I walked up to the front door. Years of habit made me almost knock, but then I remembered, this was the house I grew up in. I still had a key. I quietly let myself in, wanting to make a cheerful entrance. And now we can completely remodel the kitchen. Those cabinets have been begging to be replaced for years. I heard my mom's voice coming from the living room. I was thinking of something more sustainable. Maybe bamboo or reclaimed wood, Ivy's voice replied in that slightly condescending tone she always used when talking about her conscious choices. It's going to cost a fortune. My dad chimed in, always the most practical one in the group. We'll figure it out, my mom answered with a carefree attitude that caught me off guard. Money had always been a tense topic in our home. I stepped into the room, still holding the bottle of champagne. Looks like I'm walking in on an important discussion, I said with a smile, trying to keep the mood light. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me in shock. No one had expected to see me there. Skylar? My mom recovered first, standing, to hug me. What a lovely surprise. My dad gave a nervous smile, while Ivy muttered a casual, "Hey sis," quickly closing the folder of material samples she'd been reviewing. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, I said, holding up the bottle. I have some good news and wanted to share it in person. I got promoted. I'm now a senior project manager. The congratulations came automatically, but I sensed an underlying tension in the room. Something was off. I decided to address what I had overheard. So, a kitchen remodel? I asked, sitting in the only empty chair. Sounds like quite the project. Just a few updates, my mom replied quickly. Nothing major. It's a necessity, Ivy added. This kitchen's basically the same as it was when we were kids. I nodded slowly, remembering the months I had to postpone fixing my own leaking shower because every extra dollar went toward the mortgage on this house. Makes sense, I said calmly. But maybe it would be better to wait until the mortgage is fully paid off? That shouldn't be too far off now, right? The silence that followed was so heavy it felt almost physical. My parents exchanged a quick glance I recognized instantly. It was the same look they used to share when I was a kid, right before telling me we couldn't go on a school trip because the budget's tight this month. What is it? I asked, a knot starting to form in my stomach. Well, sweetheart, my mom began, her voice artificially sweet. Another red flag. Actually, the mortgage, it was paid off almost 2 years ago. 2 years. The number echoed in my mind. As I quickly did the math. 24 months, $36,000. Enough money for a new car, or a down payment on a small apartment, or the specialization course I'd been wanting to take. 2 years? I repeated slowly, trying to process the information. Why did you keep taking my money then? Expenses don't just disappear because the mortgage is paid off, my dad replied, his voice defensive. There are still taxes, insurance, maintenance, which don't even come close to $1,500 a month, I shot back, feeling my pulse start to race. Why didn't you tell me? We were going to tell you, my mom jumped in quickly. We were just waiting for the right moment. 2 years is a long time to wait for the right moment, Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. That's when I noticed something strange. Ivy didn't look surprised at all. In fact, she looked uncomfortable, but not shocked, as if she already knew. Ivy knew? I asked directly. My sister looked away, suddenly fascinated by a loose thread on her handmade crochet blouse. We didn't want to worry you, my dad finally said. You've always been so busy with work. There was something else. Something they weren't telling me. The tension in the room was too thick to be just about a paid-off mortgage. What else? I asked, locking eyes with my mother. Is there something else I need to know? Another exchanged glance between my parents. My heart sank. Skylar, my dad began, his tone carefully controlled. Your mother and I are getting older. We need to start thinking about the future, about planning our assets. Okay, I replied slowly, not understanding where this was going. Recently, he continued, unable to look me in the eyes, we transferred the ownership of the house to Ivy's name. The world seemed to stop for a moment. The house I had faithfully paid for over the past decade. The house that meant so much more to me than just 4 walls and a roof. The house that represented every overtime shift, every postponed vacation, every dream put on hold. Why? Was all I could manage to ask, my voice barely a whisper. It was my mom who answered, her voice firm as if she were explaining something, perfectly reasonable. Your sister will never have your financial stability, Skylar. You'll always land on your feet. Ivy needs this security for her future. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they tricked me into continuing to pay off a mortgage that had already been settled, but they had used my own hard-earned success as a justification to completely cut me out. I looked at Ivy, hoping to see at least a flicker of discomfort, or guilt. Instead, she quickly went on the defensive. Not everything is about money, Skylar, she said, her tone condescending again. You've always been so materialistic. I'm sure with your big salary you won't even miss it. In that moment, I saw with crystal clarity what I had never allowed myself to see before. It wasn't just that my parents favored Ivy, it was that I, Skylar, had never truly been valued by my family. My hard work, my sacrifices, my loyalty, all of it was expected, assumed, taken for granted, every time I held off on buying something for myself so I could send money to save the family home. Every late night I spent working on extra projects just to earn bonuses that went straight into my parents' account. Every time I defended Ivy when friends questioned why she received so much while contributing so little, the magnitude of the betrayal was crushing. You're being dramatic, my mom said, misinterpreting my silence as anger. It's not like you need the house. It's not about needing the house, I finally replied, my voice strangely calm. It's about respect. It's about acknowledgement. We appreciate everything you've done. My dad tried to smooth things over, but we had to think about Ivy's future. And what about my future? I asked. Did you ever stop to think about what I gave up over all these years? The silence was answer. Enough. What happened next shocked my family more than the confrontation itself. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't demand my money back. Instead, I calmly stood up, picked up my purse and the still unopened bottle of champagne. I need time to process this, I said simply. Please don't call me for now. And I walked out. The look on their faces, that mix of confusion and guilty relief, said everything. They had expected an outburst, a dramatic scene they could later label as Skylar being over the top as always. My calmness left them without a script to follow. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before finally stopping at an overlook with a view of the city. The sun was beginning to set, painting Portland in shades of orange and pink. The city I grew up in. The city where I had sacrificed so much for people who, I now realized, never truly saw me. I picked up my phone and called the one person who would understand. "Tessa? Can you meet me?" Half an hour later, we were sitting on a bench in Laurelhurst Park, the champagne bottle between us, now open, but for a very different reason than originally planned. I always knew they favored Ivy, I confessed after telling her everything, but I never thought they'd go this far. Tessa, who had known my family for over a decade, shook her head sadly. "The problem was never that Ivy was the favorite, Skylar. The problem was how they exploited your loyalty." 10 years, I murmured, over $180,000, and they don't even think I deserve a share of that house. "Because you're strong and independent and always land on your feet," Tessa echoed my mother's words with disgust, as if those qualities deserve punishment instead of respect. That night, I slept on Tessa's couch, unable to return to my apartment and face the four walls that represented everything I had sacrificed. My phone rang incessantly. My mom, my dad, even Ivy. I ignored every call. The next morning, I went back to work as if nothing had happened. I buried myself in my projects, replying to emails and attending meetings with mechanical efficiency. It was during lunch that Caleb noticed something was off. "You're unusually quiet today," he remarked as we shared a table in the company cafeteria. "That usually means something's very wrong." I hesitated, but then I told him the whole story. To my surprise, Caleb didn't show the shock I had expected. Instead, he nodded with a familiarity that caught my attention. "My family did something similar," he revealed. "Not with a house, but with my dad's business. For years, I worked there practically for free, believing that one day it would be partially or fully mine. When he retired, he sold everything and split the money equally among my 3 siblings and me, even though they never lifted a finger to help." "How did you deal with that?" I asked, desperate for some kind of guidance. "Badly at first," he admitted with a wry smile. "I was furious, cut ties for a while, but eventually I realized something that changed everything for me." "What was it?" "That the person who most needed my healthy boundaries was me," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "That continuing to blame my family for not valuing me was keeping me from valuing myself." His words hit something deep within me. For my entire adult life, I had sought validation through sacrifice, as if, somehow, by giving everything up, for my family, they would finally see my worth. In the days that followed, I began to examine not just the recent betrayal, but the entire pattern of our family dynamic. I remembered how, at 16, I gave up a summer architecture program to work and help pay the household bills, while the very next year, my parents somehow found money to send Ivy to an arts camp. I remembered how, during college, I would come home on weekends to help maintain the house, painting, fixing things, gardening, while Ivy was too busy discovering herself. "I think I always knew," I confessed to Tessa during one of our late-night talks. "I always knew that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough." "Then why did you keep giving?" she asked gently. The answer surprised me with its simplicity. "Because I believed that was my value. That being helpful, dependable, the provider, was all I had to offer." It was a devastating moment of self-discovery. Beneath my facade of competence and independence, there was a deeply rooted belief that I wasn't loved for who I was, only for what I could do for others. A week after the revelation at my parents' house, I received an email from my mother. It wasn't an apology, but rather an attempt to normalize the situation. "I hope you've gotten over your disappointment. Family is more important than material things." The irony didn't escape me. The same mother who had used family to manipulate me into continuing to send money was now using family to guilt me for being hurt. Have you ever felt so undervalued by those closest to you that you started to question your own worth? Have you ever realized that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but a necessary act of self-care? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes hearing each other's stories is the first step to realizing we deserve more than scraps of affection in exchange for constant sacrifice. 2 weeks after everything happened, I made a decision. It was time to consult a professional. Not to sue my family, as some friends had suggested, but to clearly understand my position and options. Helena Vasquez, a lawyer specializing in real estate law, welcomed me into her office in downtown Portland. I told her the whole story, including every bank transfer I had made over the years. From a strictly legal standpoint, Helena explained after listening carefully, your situation is challenging. Without a written agreement stating that the payments were investments in the property rather than gifts, your legal grounds to contest are limited. So there's nothing I can do? I asked, feeling a wave of discouragement. Legally, the path would be difficult and uncertain, she answered honestly. But Skylar, may I offer an observation? After years of dealing with family disputes over property, I've learned something important. You can't change the past, but you can absolutely reshape your future. That sentence stayed with me. Reshape my future. That was exactly what I needed to do. What happened was deeply unfair, Helena continued. But the real question now is, how do you choose to respond? What story do you want to write from here? I left Helena's office with legal clarity, but more importantly, with emotional clarity. The money was gone, yes, but the real cost had been allowing that dynamic to consume years of my life. That night, I did something I never imagined I would do. I opened my laptop and wrote a simple, straightforward email. Dear Mom, Dad, and Ivy. After careful reflection, I've decided to stop my financial support, effective immediately. As you yourselves have said, I always land on my feet, and I trust that you'll find ways to manage now that the house is mortgage-free and safely in Ivy's name. I'm asking for space and time while I reassess our relationship and establish healthier boundaries for all of us. Skylar. I reread it 3 times to make sure there was no anger or blame, just a clear statement of facts and intentions. Then I hit send and felt a literal weight lift off my shoulders. The response came in under an hour. A phone call from my mother that I let go to voicemail, followed by a shocked message. Skylar, I don't understand this sudden coldness. We're your family. We need to talk about this immediately. I didn't reply. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with a financial advisor that Tessa had recommended. Lauren Gardner specialized in helping people rebuild after major financial setbacks. The $500 a month is a substantial amount to redirect, Lauren said after reviewing my financial situation. If you start investing that amount consistently, now, even after this 10-year delay, you can still build significant wealth. Together, we developed a 3-part plan. First, a portion of the money would go into a solid emergency fund, something I surprisingly had never really established, always assuming that any family emergency would be my financial responsibility. Second, we'd begin actively looking for real estate opportunities, not just a home for myself, but also a small investment property, taking advantage of my civil engineering background to identify places with good potential for appreciation. Third, and maybe most importantly, we allocated a small monthly amount for something that had never been part of my budget: enjoyment. Travel, hobbies, experiences I'd denied myself for far too long. Consider it an investment in your mental health. Lauren insisted when I hesitated on that last part. You can't rebuild successfully if you keep denying your own needs. As I implemented my financial plan, another part of my life began to shift. At work, I accepted an offer to lead an international project that I had previously turned down because it would require frequent travel, something I had always avoided to stay available for my family. Our Vancouver branch needs someone with your expertise. My boss had explained months earlier, and months. It would be 1 week of travel per month, but I understand if that's difficult with your family commitments. At the time, I had politely declined. Now I approached him and asked if the position was still available. Absolutely, he replied, looking surprised but pleased. It would actually be perfect to have you leading that project. At home, I started transforming my small apartment. For years, I had avoided investing in anything permanent, always thinking it was temporary, that I'd be moving on to something better soon. Now, I bought plants, art, and even invested in a proper drafting table I had wanted for years. The messages and calls from my family kept coming, growing more urgent. My dad: "Your mom is really stressed out about your attitude." Ivy: "You can't just cut off family like this. It's toxic." My mom: "After everything we've done for you." I held firm. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about health. As Caleb had once said, the person who needed my healthy boundaries the most was me. And then, 3 months after my quiet departure from my parents' home, a real estate opportunity came up that would change everything. A coworker casually mentioned a property in St. John's, an up-and-coming neighborhood in Portland. My uncle's moving to Florida and needs to sell quickly. It's a main house with a small unit in the back he used to rent out. It won't even hit the open market. At another time, I would have dismissed the idea. Properties in Portland were out of my reach, or so I'd always told myself. But now, with 3 months of savings from what I used to send my parents, and the bonus from the international project, I had a decent amount for a down payment. I visited the property the next day. The main house was modest, but charming. A 2-bedroom bungalow with a small office, perfect for me. The unit in the back, though in need of renovations, was a fully self-contained studio that could generate rental income. "It'll need work," I said, examining structural issues with an engineer's eye. "That's why the price is below market," my coworker's uncle explained. "I just don't have the energy to do renovations at my age." That night, I made detailed spreadsheets, calculating costs, appreciation potential, renovation expenses. With my engineering background and connections in the construction industry, I could do a lot of the work for a fraction of the usual cost. Week later, my offer was accepted. A month after that, I signed the papers. Homeowner. The word felt surreal. As I worked on the renovations during weekends and evenings, something unexpected happened. I discovered that I loved the process. Years of designing buildings for others were finally translating into creating something for myself. Every wall I painted, every shelf I installed was a declaration. This space is mine, a physical manifestation of my worth. Work transformed too. On the international project, away from the shadow of my family obligations, I thrived. My ideas were valued, my leadership recognized. For the first time, I allowed myself to receive compliments without brushing them off. "You seem different," Caleb said during a video call while I was in Vancouver. "Lighter." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm finally living my own life, not just existing to make things easier for everyone else." Our friendship deepened over those months. Caleb understood my journey in a way few could, having gone through his own version of it. Our conversations, once limited to work topics with the occasional personal confession, became more frequent, more meaningful. "I'd love to see your house when it's done," he suggested during one of those talks. "It sounds like you're creating something special there." "I'd love to show you," I replied, surprised at how natural it felt, how the usual awkwardness in moments like that wasn't there. Within 2 months, the transformation of the property was remarkable. The main house now reflected my personality: vibrant yet cozy colors, functional spaces that were also beautiful, a small library in the office filled with books I had always wanted to collect but never allowed myself to buy. The backyard studio, fully renovated, had been listed for rent and was quickly taken by a graduate architecture student, a synchronicity that made me smile. As my external life changed, so did my internal world. I started practicing yoga, ironically something my sister was passionate about. But unlike Ivy, who taught yoga as a spiritual path, I practiced it as a way to reconnect with my own body, a body I had neglected for years while focusing solely on productivity. I started cooking elaborate meals just for myself, a revolutionary, act for someone who had lived off frozen food and leftovers for years. I began sleeping better, laughing more easily, breathing more deeply. One afternoon, as I was painting a mural on the wall of my new bedroom, I received an unexpected text message. It was from my cousin Marcus. "We're hosting a family lunch. This Sunday, we've missed you. Please come if you can." My first instinct was to decline. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Ivy in over 3 months. But something inside me, this new version of Skylar that was emerging, felt strong enough to face whatever might come. "I'll be there," I replied simply. The next day, while talking to Caleb about the invitation during lunch, he offered a perspective that caught me off guard. "You don't have to go to rebuild your relationship with them," he suggested. "You can go to show yourself how far you've come." "What do you mean?" "The Skylar I know now doesn't seek their approval anymore. She doesn't need them to acknowledge her worth to know she's worthy." His words echoed inside me. It was true. I wasn't desperate for their recognition anymore. I didn't need them to see my sacrifices to know I mattered. That's when I realized Caleb had become more than a coworker, more than even a friend. There was a mutual understanding between us, an appreciation that went beyond words. "Would you like to have dinner with me on Friday?" I asked impulsively. "At my new place. It's still a bit under construction, but I'd love to," he replied without hesitation. "I've been waiting for you to ask." That first dinner with Caleb in my new home was revealing, not just because of the budding romance between us, which blossomed naturally in a space where we could both be authentic, but also for the realization that this was the first time I had ever invited someone into a space that truly reflected who I was. "It's amazing what you've done here," he said as I showed him the renovations. "Not just the physical changes, but the energy of the place. It feels like you." "It's the first time I've had a space that really feels like mine," I confessed. "Where every decision was made by me, for me. Most people take a lifetime to learn that lesson," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Some never do." That night, sitting in my own backyard under the stars, Caleb's hand gently holding mine, I felt a peace I didn't know was possible. The lost money, the years of being taken advantage of, they still hurt, of course, but for the first time, that pain didn't define me. The next morning, I faced my closet with a renewed sense of determination. For the family lunch, I wouldn't wear my usual clothes, practical, modest, designed not to attract attention. Instead, I chose a colorful dress I had bought in Vancouver, paired with handcrafted earrings I would never have dared to wear before. The new Skylar was ready to face the family, not to seek approval, but to declare her presence. I arrived at Marcus and Diana's house exactly on time for lunch. I parked my car, the same old reliable sedan, one of the few things in my life that hadn't changed, and took a deep breath before stepping out. My cousin's backyard was full of familiar faces, aunts, uncles, some distant cousins I rarely saw. And of course, in one corner, my parents and Ivy, already forming their usual tight little circle. Diana was the first to spot me, crossing the lawn to greet me with a genuine hug. "Skylar, so glad you came." Her reaction drew everyone's attention. All eyes turned to me, many with surprised expressions. It wasn't just the vibrant dress or the confidence in my posture. It was something deeper. The energy around me had shifted. "Wow," Marcus exclaimed, joining us. "Someone's glowing today. What happened to you?" "Life happened," I said with a smile. "Let's just say I went through some remodeling." The greetings continued as I made my way around the yard. It was strange how many people noticed the change in me, commenting on how good I looked, asking what was different. Meanwhile, my parents and Ivy watched from afar, clearly unsettled by my new presence. Eventually, the inevitable happened. I approached them, determined to be polite but firm. "Hello," I said simply. "Skylar," my mom said, her tone a mix of relief and apprehension. "We were worried. You didn't return our calls. I needed space, I explained, as I mentioned in the email. That dress is different, Ivy remarked, clearly uncomfortable with my new appearance. Thank you, I replied, without apologizing or offering an explanation. My dad, always the peacemaker, tried to ease the tension. You look good, sweetheart. Work going well? Very well, actually. I'm leading an international project now. I travel to Vancouver regularly. Vancouver? My mom asked, surprised. But you always turn down projects that involved travel. Things change, I said casually. Speaking of changes, I bought a house. The bomb was dropped so naturally it took a moment for the words to register on their faces. My dad was the first to react. A house? But how? When? I closed a month ago. A lovely bungalow in St. John's with a small studio in the back that I'm renting out. St. John's is up and coming, someone nearby commented, apparently eavesdropping. Great investment. My mother's face showed genuine confusion. But you never mentioned you were looking to buy. And how did you save for a down payment? So quickly? The question hung in the air for a moment. Everyone around us, now openly listening, knew exactly what had happened 3 months earlier. News travels fast in families. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you start investing in yourself, I replied calmly, looking her straight in the eyes. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Ivy, always quick to paint herself, as the victim when confronted, tried to change the subject. Well, the parents' house needs a lot of repairs. The roof is leaking and I'm sure you'll figure out a way to deal with that, I interrupted gently. After all, it's your responsibility now. The tension intensified when Aunt Lucy, always blunt, turned to my parents. Georgia, aren't you still getting financial help from Skylar? I thought she'd been supporting you for years. My dad looked visibly uncomfortable. Skylar helped us when we needed it, but now we're adjusting. The house is mortgage-free, my mom added quickly. We're perfectly fine. That's when Marcus, always the protector of the younger cousins, stepped into the conversation. Actually, I've been meaning to bring that up. What you did to Skylar was inexcusable. A stunned silence fell over the group. Marcus rarely involved himself in family drama. I'm not sure everyone knows, he continued, glancing around, but Skylar paid her parents' mortgage for 10 years, over $180,000, and when the loan was finally paid off, they transferred the house into Ivy's name without even consulting Skylar. Shocked murmurs rippled through the group. Diana joined her husband, and they kept accepting money from Skylar for 2 more years after the mortgage was paid, without telling her. My mother flushed red. That's a private matter within our immediate family. It's not, yes, it is our business, Diana interrupted. We stayed silent for years while watching how differently you treated the two of them, always expecting Skylar to be the responsible one, the provider, while Ivy got everything handed to her. Ivy tried to defend herself. This is so unfair. Skylar always had it easier. She's naturally smart, successful, while you chose not to take responsibility, Marcus finished. No one's saying you have to have the same kind of career as Skylar, but contributing to the family, pulling your weight, that's basic. I looked at my cousins with surprise and gratitude. They had never spoken up like this before, even though they'd witnessed years of this unequal dynamic. Why are you bringing this up now? My dad asked, clearly uncomfortable. Because Skylar finally valued herself enough to set boundaries, Diana replied. And because it's long overdue for someone to say out loud what we've all seen for years. My mom tried to regain control of the situation. We only did what we thought was best for both our daughters. Skylar always managed well, while Ivy what, Mom? I interrupted calmly. Needed more? Deserved more? Was more loved? The question hung heavy in the air. To my surprise, it was my father who finally broke the silence. His voice choked with emotion. We messed up, Skylar, he said, staring at the floor. We took advantage of your generosity because it was convenient, because you never complained, never asked for recognition. That unexpected admission hit me like a punch. My mom looked at my dad in shock, as if he had broken some unspoken family code. "Richard," she exclaimed. "It's true, Georgia," he continued, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "We used her strength against her. We turned her independence into an excuse to give less, to expect more. It was never fair." Ivy, realizing the power dynamics were shifting quickly, tried a different approach. "Skylar, I didn't know how much you'd contributed. They never told me the exact numbers. When I heard about the house being transferred, I just assumed it was because you didn't want it." It was a transparent lie. Ivy had been present at countless family dinners where my financial contributions were brought up. She herself had mocked my materialism when I confronted our parents about the house. "Ivy," I replied calmly, "I think we all know that's not true. But honestly, I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to show that I've moved on." I turned to my parents. "For 10 years, I put your needs above mine because I thought that was love. But now I understand that love also includes healthy boundaries and mutual respect." The rest of lunch continued in an odd truce. My parents, clearly shaken by the public confrontation and my dad's admission, remained quiet. Ivy alternated between trying to justify herself to other relatives and shooting resentful glances my way. As I was about to leave, my dad approached me timidly. "We'd love to see your new place sometime," he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "If you'd be willing." I considered for a moment. "Maybe one day, but not now. I'm still establishing my boundaries, and I need you to respect them." He nodded, accepting my answer. It was Marcus who walked me to my car. "I'm proud of you, not just for finally standing up for yourself, but for doing it with grace. No revenge, no drama." "Thanks for saying that," I replied. "For seeing it all these years." "We should have said something earlier," he admitted. "But you always seemed so unshakable, like you didn't need anyone to stand up for you." I smiled at the irony. I think we all need someone to stand up for us sometimes, even the strong ones. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that show how setting healthy boundaries can transform our lives. Your support allows me to keep sharing narratives like this, stories that reveal the power of recognizing our own worth, even when those who should value us fail to do so. The living room in my new house is full of laughter and lively conversation. Tessa and her husband, Helena, two co-workers who became close friends, and Caleb, now officially my boyfriend, are all sharing a meal I prepared. To the hostess, Tessa raises her glass, who not only built this beautiful house but made it a true home. I look around the table at the smiling faces around me and feel a wave of gratitude. This is my chosen family, people who value me not for what I can do for them, but simply for who I am. The house is finally complete. Every room reflects not just my taste, but my journey. In the office, diplomas and certificates that used to sit rolled up in a drawer now decorate the walls, along with photos of projects I'm proud of. In the backyard, a small garden is beginning to bloom, another newly discovered hobby. The studio out back now houses its second tenant, a musician who occasionally fills the air with the sound of violin melodies. The extra income allowed me to start a small travel fund. My first international destination is already planned. At work, my new confidence has translated into even more recognition. The Vancouver project was such a success that they offered me the chance to oversee an expansion into Seattle. It's an opportunity I would have once turned down automatically, afraid I needed to stay available for my family. Caleb and I have grown together, our relationship rooted in mutual respect and real understanding. "You inspire me," he told me one night. "Watching you reinvent yourself made me question where I've been holding myself back to." As for my biological family, things are evolving. My parents tried several tactics, from emotional appeals, "We miss you," to manipulation, "Your dad's not doing well," to a reluctant acceptance of my new boundaries. I allowed them a short visit to my home. It was awkward and tense, but necessary. My dad seemed genuinely impressed with what I'd created. My mom, always more resistant to change, visibly struggled to adjust to this new dynamic where I was no longer under her emotional control. "It's a beautiful place," my dad said sincerely. "Looks expensive," my mom noted, unable to offer a direct compliment. "It's valuable to me," I replied simply. "And it was an investment in my future." The underlying message didn't go unnoticed. As for Ivy, our relationship remains the most complicated. After unanswered texts and attempts to return to the status quo as if nothing had happened, she finally sent an email that hinted at some self-reflection. "Skylar, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I never really considered how much you sacrificed over the years, or how unfair it must have felt to watch the house go into my name after everything you contributed. It was always easy to see you as the perfect sister who had it all together, who didn't need help or special consideration. I now realize that was convenient for me. It let me keep being the one who needed support without questioning my own role in the family dynamic. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I'd like to try building a different kind of relationship if you're ever open to it. Ivy." The email arrives on the very night of the dinner with my friends. As I sit on the couch after everyone has left, rereading my sister's words, Caleb sits down next to me. "What are you thinking?" he asks gently. "I'm thinking that some bridges can be rebuilt," I reply slowly. "Not to cross back to where I was, but maybe toward new ground." "Will you write her back? Tomorrow?" I decide, setting the phone aside. Tonight is about celebrating the present, not revisiting the past. Lying in the bed of my own room, in my own home, I reflect on my extraordinary journey. The painful betrayal that had once felt like a devastating loss became the catalyst for my liberation. I spent so much time trying to buy my family's love that I forgot to build a life of my own. Ironically, it was only when I stopped trying to prove my worth through sacrifice that I finally began to truly value myself. The most profound discovery wasn't about money or property. It was about identity. For years, I had defined myself primarily as the dependable daughter, the responsible sister, the tireless provider. When those identities were betrayed, I was forced to rediscover who I really was and who I could become. The journey I've shared with you isn't just about a house or lost money. It's about the invisible price we pay when we allow others to define our worth. For a decade, I believed my sacrifices would eventually be recognized, that my loyalty would be rewarded with equal love. The harsh truth I've learned is that some people are perfectly comfortable taking and taking without ever acknowledging the cost to the giver. The painful paradox of dysfunctional family dynamics is that it's often the strongest, most responsible, and most compassionate people who end up being the most exploited. Our best qualities, loyalty, generosity, the desire to help, are used against us, turned into invisible chains that keep us locked in roles we never chose. But there is a deep beauty in breaking those patterns. When we finally recognize our own worth, when we stop seeking external validation and begin to see ourselves through our own eyes, an incredible transformation occurs, not just in how others treat us, but in how we experience the world. Today, I live in a home I built for myself, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. My relationship with my biological family is still evolving, some bonds slowly healing, others perhaps remaining distant. And that's okay, because the most important lesson I've learned is that family isn't just the one we're born into. It's also the one we choose and build. It's the people who celebrate our victories without envy, who stand with us in our pain without judgment, who see us fully and love us anyway. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped in dynamics where your worth was measured only by how much you sacrificed, know this: setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an essential act of self-care. Recognizing your own value is not arrogance. It's fundamental honesty. Sometimes the greatest disappointment can become your greatest gift, if you let it free you instead of define you. Sometimes the only way to win an unfair game is to stop playing it altogether and write your own rules. And in the end, the most valuable house we can build isn't made of bricks and mortar, but of self-awareness, healthy boundaries, and self-love.